Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Happy Friday. It's August 29th. Great to be with you on this, the feast of St. Augustine of Hippo. Yesterday, of course, celebrating the beautiful feast day of St. Monica. And we talked earlier in the week, if you recall, for our Italy Shrines and Wonders and where you can go in the motherland to discover and follow in the footsteps of these two great saints. Now, they were originally from, obviously, northern Africa, St. Augustine of Hippo, right? But he came to Italy, was trying to get away from his Mama Monica, who was praying for him and praying for his conversion to Christianity. And he ended up in Ostia, Antica. And then, of course, she followed him. Surprise! Here I am. I'm summarizing the story. But at the end of the day, with the help of great St. Ambrose from Milan, he became a Christian. Of course, not only a Christian, but one of the great early church fathers and teachers of the faith. St. Augustine and St. Monica pray for us, and it shows the power of prayer. But if you're interested to learn more about Ostia Antica and Milan and the places associated with St. Augustine and St. Monica, I hope you will check out my book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Sacred Spaces and Fascinating Places in Italy. So it's doing quite well, and it's a beautiful book. It's a guidebook, but it's much more than that because we talk a lot about the saints and people whose lives have been changed by journeying to Italy. We did actually last night with the beautiful banquet wrap up the Catholic Radio Conference for EWTN and had fun yesterday doing a live presentation with Matt Swaim and Anna Mitchell and Ace McKay. Of course, Matt and Annie are from the Sunrise Morning Show, which you hear every day here at EWTN, and Ace is one of our stellar producers working at headquarters in Irondale. And the title of that panel was Ready, Set, Show. So we talked about how we prepare for our programs each day, and it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of good questions. So I am about to head out to the airport to head back to the Motor City, and that's why we have a special edition of Catholic Connection for you. And of course, Monday, believe it or not, is Labor Day. I just can't wrap my head around that yet. But because it's Labor Day, obviously we have the day off, but we will have a beautiful program, and it's going to be so much fun because we're going to be dedicating it to travel and also wrapping up the summer for you in a very special way with incredible guests, including Father Leo Padalinghug, Father Michael Schmitz, John Hale from Corporate Travel, and other guests as well. Today, though, getting back to the day at hand, we are going to have, of course, your Fact Check Friday coming up after the weather and the news. Now, Doug won't be joining us today. We'll give him the day off, but he will be rejoining us next week. And then I think you are going to really enjoy when we sit down once again with Michael O'Neill, the Miracle Hunter. Of course, he has a program on Saturdays here on EWTN. He's speaking in Cincinnati in just a few days, as a matter of fact, and he'll tell us about that presentation. He's going to be talking about Eucharistic miracles, and he's also going to be sharing experience on visiting the many tombs of the saints. Now, Michael and I are also talking about doing a pilgrimage together, so that's in the works. But anyway, he's great. He's got all kinds of tons of information, so I love always talking with Michael O'Neill. So that is a look at our program on a Friday. Wishing you a beautiful Friday and a beautiful, oh my goodness already, Labor Day weekend. Right now, let's get started with the weather and the news. National Weather Service is saying that there's a cool weather pattern continuing for most areas to the east of the Rockies, except for South Texas, northern North Dakota, and northern Minnesota. Above average temperatures are persisting across the Pacific Northwest and the northern Great Basin. Wet weather likely across much of the plains and across the Gulf Coast into Florida. That's a look at the forecast. Now let's take a look at the news on a Friday morning here on EWTN. Well, the FBI is now investigating this week's deadly shooting at the Minneapolis church as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime. Reporter Maggie Vespa says a shooter opened fire as Catholic school students were attending Mass.
Just before the attack, investigators say the shooter posted a series of disturbing videos showing numerous writings on weapons, including racial slurs, a call for President Donald Trump's death, anti-Semitic messages, and references to the Holocaust and the Catholic Church, according to an NBC News review.
2 children ages 8 and 10 were killed in the attack, 17 other people hurt. Police say the shooter, identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman, died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Meanwhile, this child said his friend may be the reason why he wasn't hurt in this week's incident.
The first one, I was like, what is that? I thought it was just something. Then when I heard it again, I just ran under the pew. And then I covered my head. My friend Victor, saved me, though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit.
Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said the deceased children died while praying in the pews. 14 of the wounded are children. President Trump, meanwhile, ordering flags flown at half-staff to honor the victims. And the head of emergency services in Minneapolis says, as you just heard, children were indeed protecting other children during the shooting. EMS Chief Mary Sheaver called that amazing. She went on to say there were also teachers protecting children while being shot at themselves. Meanwhile, an ER doctor from local health care taking care of the patient says 9 are still being treated. In total, there were 17 wounded. 14 are children, 3 are adults, and all of them are expected to survive. President Trump's health secretary is speaking out also about the deadly church shooting in Minnesota. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. blamed psychiatric drugs.
One of the culprits we need to examine is whether the fact that we are the most over-medicated nation in the world.
Speaking at a health conference in Texas, he says that other countries do have the same amount of weapons as the U.S., but he claimed they do not have mass shootings as we do here. Court records show that the church shooting suspect called himself or identified as a woman and started that back in 2020, but it's unclear if he was on any medications. In other news this morning, Pope Leo XIV yesterday encouraging Catholic politicians to live coherently as Christians and follow the gospel even when performing their public duties in a secular setting. During a meeting yesterday with a delegation of political representatives in France, accompanied by a local bishop from France, the Holy Father stating that a more just, more human, more fraternal world can only be a world more imbued with the gospel. Thus, he said, in the face of the various deviations present in our Western societies, we can do nothing better as Christians than to turn to Christ and ask for his help in carrying out those responsibilities. For this reason, he said, the Holy Father was highlighting the importance of political and social leaders being committed to acting in coherence with their faith, because beyond mere personal enrichment, it carries great importance and usefulness for the men and women whom they serve. The Latin and Greek Orthodox Patriarchs of Jerusalem releasing a joint appeal for peace in Gaza earlier this week, and they're also saying there's no reason to justify the deliberate and forcible mass displacement of civilians. And as Devin Watkins with Vatican News reports, this week the Holy Father joined the voices and recalled the day of prayer and fasting for peace, which took place on Friday, August 22nd.
He also called for the safe entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza and the protection of civilians. I appeal, added the Pope, for all hostages to be freed, a permanent ceasefire to be reached, the safe entry of humanitarian aid to be facilitated, and humanitarian law to be fully respected. He especially called for respect for the obligation to protect civilians and for the prohibitions against collective punishment, the indiscriminate use of force, and the forced displacement of populations. The Pope concluded his appeal by invoking the Blessed Virgin Mary to pray for peace.
La sua intercessione ottenga riconciliazione e pace.
May her intercession, he prayed, obtain reconciliation and peace in that land so dear to us all. In their appeal, the Patriarchs of Jerusalem said the cycle of violence must end and the common good must be prioritized. There has been enough devastation in the territories and in people's lives, they said. There is no reason to justify keeping civilians as prisoners and hostages in dramatic conditions. The Patriarchs pray that hearts may be converted so that we may walk in the paths of justice and life for Gaza and the Holy Land. We do not know exactly what will happen on the ground, not only for our community, but for the entire population, said the Patriarchs. But, they added, there can be no future based on captivity, displacement of Palestinians, or revenge. I'm Devin Watkins.
The FBI cracking down on an alleged multi-state forced labor and money laundering scheme linked to a church based out of the city of Detroit. Kyle Taylor, who says he knows some of the victims, claims it was more like a cult.
They would do their best to push you out of here. Some of the individuals that their parents would go here, they would try to go in and get their parents. They were escorted out. It was just fear. It was a fear-based thing that nobody wanted to talk about it, but they knew something was wrong.
Federal prosecutors say David Taylor, a self-proclaimed apostle and executive director, Michelle Branham, ran the Kingdom of God Global Church using unpaid labor at call centers to bring in $50 million in donations over the past 10 years. That money allegedly funded their luxurious lifestyle. Both were arrested Wednesday after FBI raids in Detroit. The White House says the governor of Illinois should ask for help with crime in Chicago. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Chicago's crime rate is the legacy of the governor.
We've been seeing the governor of Illinois parading out there saying that there's nothing wrong with Chicago. It's a great place to live. There's no crime there. He doesn't need President Trump's help. Well, I think the residents of Chicago beg to differ.
President Trump has talked about possibly conducting a similar crime crackdown in the Windy City, similar to the one in Washington. Leavitt also touting the D.C. crackdown, saying violent crime and carjackings are way down since the president's effort began. In a Truth Social post today about Chicago crime, Trump said, "Stay tuned." Monica Nelson tells us the CDC director has been fired by the White House.
HHS announced Susan Monarez was no longer the agency's director yesterday, and at first she refused to leave the post. Her lawyers said it was due to her being a person of integrity and devoted to science, while also adding she was targeted after clashing with HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. over vaccine policies. A White House spokesperson says she was not aligned with President Trump's agenda and that they had terminated her. At least 4 top health officials announced their resignations as a result. I'm Monica Nelson.
The Florida Attorney General is giving an update on Operation Summer Hurricane, which is aimed at taking child predators off the street.
8 individuals being arrested, 6 are already in custody. And one of these individuals, I will point out, is an illegal alien that should not even be in the country.
The AG says this is an ongoing problem with illegal immigrants being picked up each time they conduct a sting. He recommends closely monitoring children's online activity. Reporter William Denslow says the U.S. and the European Union are now providing details of their new framework trade agreement. He says the two sides have issued a joint statement.
Under this agreement, the baseline tariff rate for European goods heading to the US is set at 15%. EU officials say these duties won't be subject to add-ons, arguing it's a better deal than other nations have reached with Washington.
Tariffs on European cars and auto parts will fall from 25% to 15% if the EU gets rid of all tariffs on American industrial products. The EU is also expected to invest $600 billion across U.S. strategic sectors over the next 3 years. The deal has yet to be finalized. And Monica Nelson tells us Hertz is partnering with Amazon to sell used cars.
The car rental company announced on Wednesday its pre-owned vehicle sales will be hosted on the Amazon Auto website. Customers 75 miles within Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, and Seattle can start shopping now. Amazon Auto has been selling Hyundai vehicles online since 2024. Hertz's stock has jumped higher since the announcement. I'm Monica Nelson.
The TSA says it will screen more than 17 million people during the Labor Day travel period. Now, the period runs from yesterday, August 28th, all the way to next week, September 4th, with the peak travel day projected to be August 30th. TSA expects this to be the busiest Labor Day travel period on record, as the agency anticipates passenger volumes to be 8.5% higher than last year during the same time. Air travel volumes this summer are the highest the agency has seen in its history, and the top 10 busiest travel days in the agency's history have all occurred this year. And if you are taking a trip over the Labor Day weekend, it should be a little easier on the wallet. Kay Nastro of Going Travel says there's good news for people who plan to get to their Labor Day vacation or weekend by car.
We are anticipating that the lower gas prices we've seen most of the summer are going to hold, which is great because a lot of people do tend to opt for a long weekend road trip over Labor Day weekend.
It's Catholic Connection on a Friday morning of Labor Day weekend, and we'll be right back here on EWTN. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. Hope you're having a great day. Always trying to keep you connected, hence the name of the program, Catholic Connection, to what's happening in the world. And of course, being that I have a media background and have been doing media since dirt, well, pretty much 44 years now. I graduated from college, believe it or not, in 1981. It really is heartbreaking to me when I see the media getting very lazy and not doing their jobs. Now, there is so much information out there about various stories, so it's important that we consider the source and we stop and think and we make sure we really have the accurate information needed to make decisions on how we respond to whatever crisis or whatever story may be happening. So first I want to read the statement, the latest statement from Cardinal Pietro Parolin. talking about the situation in Gaza. There's a story this week, and a quote is, "We are appalled at what is happening in Gaza." And let me read this to you. You can find this statement, by the way, on Vatican News. "We are appalled by what's happening in Gaza, despite the condemnation of the whole world," Cardinal Parolin said, noting there's a unanimity in condemning what is taking place. Speaking on the sidelines of the inauguration of the liturgical week, the Cardinal referred to the Israeli strike on the Nasser hospital, which killed 20 people recently, including journalists. "It makes no sense," adding that there seem to be no openings for a solution, and the situation is becoming increasingly complicated, and from a humanitarian perspective, increasingly precarious with all the consequences we are seeing day by day. So the Vatican has made it very, very clear in terms of their concerns. The Pope has been speaking out about this every chance he gets, including mentioning it at the Angelus, at the audience, always talking about peace. And of course, as you've been hearing in the news this week, he also released a theme for the 2026 World Day of Peace. Peace be with you, toward an unarmed and disarming peace. And the Vatican is now, in conjunction with that, producing a book entitled Let There Be Peace. Here in the United States, the Church has also been doing a very, very good job of raising awareness on the plight of the people in Gaza, while at the same time calling for the release of the hostages that are still being held, the Jewish hostages that are still being held by Hamas. Now, the secular media, unfortunately, have not presented a balanced perspective on this story. The research shows that they are very much against Israel and very much for Palestinian governments. There's a really good website, though, that's out there that has done a good job of sorting through confusion and trying to get to the facts, and also calling out fellow reporters when they're not doing their jobs properly. And that website is the Free Press, and you can find it at thefp.com. Now, it's made up of journalists, many of whom are former major secular news reporters, including, you remember, Early Berliner, who worked for NPR and resigned, left his job because he was so upset with the bias that he was seeing at NPR. And even though he tried repeatedly, this guy is an award winner, a very, very well experienced journalist. He tried repeatedly to get things taken care of in-house. He went to his boss. He went to his boss's boss. He had tried to get in to see the very, very, very top people at NPR and public broadcasting in general, but they kept delaying and putting it off. And he just saw repeated signs of liberal bias, and so he walked away. Now, the interesting thing is he's a liberal himself. He makes no bones about the fact that he has never voted for a Republican. He was raised in a very liberal household, and he does not agree with President Trump, nor has he ever voted for Trump. But he says that's not the point. The point is that we are reporters, and we're supposed to be accurate. And so now he's a big part of the Free Press team. So this is an investigation that was done by fellow reporters calling out other journalists. Again, the title of this article at the Free Press, which is thefp.com, Journalists Against Journalism. And now the media are all upset that the Free Press has done this story. The subtitle of their article is, "Our critics can call us any name they like, but that doesn't change the facts." Last week, the Free Press ran an investigation, this is from the story, into a dozen viral photos published by major media outlets aimed at depicting starvation in Gaza. All 12 pictures, the report says, featured distressed Gazans, mostly children. All were skin and bones, and all suffered from pre-existing conditions such as cerebral palsy. Crucially, the last piece of information was absent from the captions or news stories they accompanied. In leaving out that context, the outlets presented an incomplete story, rather than typifying the situation in Gaza right now. These are exceptional cases. The Free Press says, "We're proud of the report of the reporters who tracked it down. In doing so, the two reported performed a public service by asking and answering a simple question. In a moment of widespread charges by international institutions and news outlets about hunger in Gaza, are these photographs representative? More, how is it that journalists failed to scrutinize information coming out of a war zone with an active terrorist group conducting information warfare?" Goes on to say, journalistic outlets love to boast about impact, and this story has had more than its share. The Free Press says that the cable news network CNN updated its piece after their reporting noting that the top story had been updated to reflect new information regarding the condition of some of the subjects. So did the Washington Post, issuing a correction to say that it had incorrectly used a year-old photo in its current coverage of mass starvation in Gaza. A year-old photo. In a normal time, this is a kind of work that would be praised by our peers for getting to ground truth, but we don't live in normal times. And that is not how some of our colleagues in the news media saw things. Those who care about the truth will note that these children were not presented as the initial victims of anything. They were deceptively promoted to reflect the average resident of Gaza. To suggest otherwise betrays a fleeting responsibility with reality. So this is the problem here, folks. There is a horrible situation in Gaza. Nobody's denying that, okay? But why are the media, many of them, as we're describing here, so lazy that they can't get to the truth? Certainly, the Vatican News Department is reporting on this every day. Go to the Vatican website. They can probably get the pictures from there with permission. Why are they taking pictures from the terrorist organization Hamas, which is known for its information warfare, as this article indicates? And quite frankly, why aren't they talking to people who are on the ground, especially Catholics there, who have seen and continue to see the destruction and the devastation? They don't have to use pictures that are not actually present pictures displaying the truth. Some of the pictures, as we mentioned, over a year old. Nobody is saying that we shouldn't talk about the tragedy in Gaza and what's happening there in the Middle East, which is horrible. And again, I started this conversation talking about the church raising awareness, Cardinal Pietro Pirlin's latest statement, the Pope calling us to pay attention to this. But we need the truth and the reality of the situation. So we're blessed that we have Catholic organizations on the ground there that are doing whatever they can and that are reporting back for us and telling us the truth about the situation and what we can do to help. But what about other people? When we find out that this is, not realistic in terms of these pictures of who these people are at the time those pictures were taken, that doesn't do the situation in Gaza any justice. Because if it casts doubt when these stories get out there, what does that make people say? Well, maybe it's not that bad, so I don't have to do anything. If their concern is about the people of Gaza, the truth is what is going to help them. Not trying to use photos from this terrorist organization that uses the media all the time and its own people to get its point across and its agenda, of course. At the end of the day, the media need to be reporting the truth and accuracy. That's their job. Not to side with one side or the other. To show what's really happening and to use accurate photos. Let me go back to the point that among the photos were those that were over a year old of people struggling with previous conditions prior to what we're seeing in Gaza now, which is real life starvation and struggle. Again, nobody is saying that there aren't issues that need to be addressed and that we don't need to help. We do. But the reporters need to do their job and speak the truth. The truth is always going to aid and help in any situation. It's about time reporters started to do their jobs and not be lazy and push their own agendas. We'll be right back. Always great to catch up with. Well, it's kind of difficult sometimes because he travels so much. Well, we both do, but it's always great to catch up with Michael O'Neill, our own Miracle Hunter, and that is a name of his program on Saturday, 7 p.m. here on EWTN. And speaking of the Miracle Hunter and pilgrimage leader, he just returned from Italy and is about to embark on a wonderful event in Cincinnati talking about saints and miracles in the Eucharist. Michael, always great to catch up with you. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I feel like I was living a life that you lead. I've been in Italy 2 times in the last 6 months, and I'm going back for the canonization of Carlo Acutis. So
look at that.
like
Isn't that
that's
great?
the type of thing that you usually do.
Yeah, well, plus, we're going back, or back now, actually, this weekend, so it's pretty exciting stuff. But I'll tell you, you never get tired of it because the Catholic Church, as you well know, and this is why you do it, because we do this because we love the faith so much, it's everywhere in Italy, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I was able to be there leading a pilgrimage this past 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. But I was able to do the northern route, going through Milan and Turin and Florence down to Rome. So that was something different as far as pilgrimages go for me. So that was really special.
Was that the first time in Torino?
No, not the first time in Torino, but it was very special because, of course, that is the home city of Pier Giorgio Frassati, who will also be canonized on September 7th. So it had a little bit of extra meaning.
Now, when you were there, did you get to venerate his tomb in St. John the Baptist Church, the same place where they house the shroud? That's an incredible place.
So we planned the pilgrimage to venerate his tomb there, but when we got there, we, of course, saw where the shroud is kept, and we saw his where his tomb normally is. But then they moved for the Jubilee of Youth his body to Maria sopra Minerva. In Rome. So we saw it in a different place than we were planning on. So it all worked out.
Yeah, it all worked out. It's interesting because the fact that they were able to move the relics there for the young people to venerate during the Jubilee of Youth was really quite beautiful. But again, I mean, I love Turin. I was been there many times, but I was very, very pleasantly surprised at the beauty of the city, because you think of Turin, you think of northern Italy, especially that part of the country, as very industrial. And in some ways it is, but it's a lovely city with a lot of French influence.
Absolutely. I think there's all kinds of hidden gems and treasures in northern Italy. We went to the Caravaggio shrine as well, and Monte Berico and other places up north as well. So Montalegro. So we squeezed in a few of these smaller Marian apparition sites as well, and I agree. It's an absolutely beautiful part of the country if you're in the right spot.
I love Montalegro. That's just amazing. I have that in my book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders. All right, let's talk a little bit about your show, what you're working on currently. I know I want to mention your speaking engagement at Our Lady of Light coming up in Cincinnati, just a couple of days actually after this program airs, but ourladyoflight.org is the website. What are you working on right now that's really special to you, Michael? What can you share with our listeners?
Well, I can't stop talking about how lucky and blessed I feel to be able to do the Explore with the Miracle Hunter program, which airs every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's where I get to travel all over the world to different places of the most famous miracles in Catholic history. And this past year, I was all over South America, and we're doing the editing now. It's obviously a 2-part process. You film it, then you bring all the footage back, and then you edit it, and then they air on EWTN. So we've been all over South America, and new episodes are coming out all the time, and one on Brazil and Aparecida is scheduled to come out very soon. So it's a lot of fun to work on this program.
How did you get so interested? Take us back, if you would. I mean, people are very familiar with your program. They're very popular, very well known. Take us back. I always love to hear people's stories about how they got involved in their various aspects or various ministries. What drew you to the miracles? What drew you to the saints and the relics and everything that you do now, Michael?
Yeah, I think what I do is somewhat unique. There aren't many other people chasing miracles around the world and filming them. So I feel like I'm in a very unique and blessed position to be able to present this information. But it is a good question how it all came to be, because there's no university degree or program or even class about how to investigate miracles or how to make movies about miracles. So like a lot of good things in life, I might attribute this to my mother. She kind of she helped instill the Catholic faith and an interest in miracles. And it was her love for Our Lady of Guadalupe. And as a young child, her seeing her own mother revert to the Catholic faith through Our Lady of Guadalupe in our family history, we consider that a little miracle. And so I always heard the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and that always stuck in my head. And by the time I got to Stanford University and was able to take an archaeology class and write a paper about Our Lady of Guadalupe, I was hooked. And so that sort of set me on the path eventually, kind of going from being an engineer and then secretly studying miracles to doing it more publicly, and now working with EWTN and pumping these programs out to the world. So it's been an incredible journey, but it really, I would give my mother all the credit. And actually, I was in Mexico City not too long ago filming there, and I got to meet with the Cardinal Archbishop there of Mexico City, and I requested permission to see the tilma, and he granted me access to venerate the tilma up close and in person. I asked to pray for my mother, who was the one who inspired me to do all this through the intercession of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So it was a real full circle event.
Did you ever think you'd be doing this full time, or it sounded like it was something that you did on the side in which you were interested? But did you ever think you could do this for a living? I love stories like this.
It's a good question because I think that when I first was interested, I was a little bit curious or concerned what people would think about me doing this, because I was a reputable engineer, and chasing miracles might for some people be like chasing Bigfoot or UFOs. So at some point I was an engineer by day and a miracle hunter by night. But when I built the website miraclehunter.com, there was so much interest. Eventually, National Geographic and Dr. Oz and Megyn Kelly and the History Channel, they all came looking, because I think everybody's kind of interested in miracles deep down, even those who don't believe. So when the door got cracked open to that, I said, how can I make a career out of that? And between the speaking engagements, like the one I'm going to be doing in Cincinnati on August 31st and September 1st, and then writing the books, and then doing the television and the radio, it turns out when you piece together all those things, there is a career in miracle hunting, even though it doesn't really exist in the real world. So I figured out the puzzle, and it's been a great ride ever since.
Talking with the miracle hunter, Michael O'Neill. You can watch his program and listen to him as well on EWTN. Just check out the website, EWTN.com, and look for the program. But his website overall, where he has on the slideshow information about the program, you can go to miraclehunter.com, as he mentioned. I want to go back to what you said about being an engineer. What type of engineer? I'm just curious.
So my engineering degree from Stanford is a mechanical engineering degree. So I like how stuff works, and maybe it aids me a little bit in piecing together these stories of miracles and apparitions. If anybody goes to my website, they might say, I bet an engineer put this together, just the way I like to categorize all the data and move it around. It's I like to think, anyway, I bring my engineering sensibilities to this strange pursuit that I'm doing.
Oh, I totally think so. I say that because I think, I'm married to an engineer. He's retired now, but he's an electrical engineer with an emphasis on architectural design and lighting. And everything makes sense. 2 + 2 = 4. 4 + 4 = 8. There's a place for everything in its place. But I think that really helps you in terms of faith as opposed to hinders you, because really, if you look at the way the universe is put together, if you look at, even if you just call it intelligent design, it only makes sense if there's someone who created it, right?
Yep, that's right, absolutely. And I think that although I never planned it this way, getting an engineering degree from a good university and having that background has only given me credibility.
I was going to say, it gives you more credibility
on investigating miracles, So it's been great.
And we'll talk more about those miracles with the Miracle Hunter, the one, the only Miracle Hunter, Michael O'Neill, who joins us, of course, on this program, but also on EWTN every week. We'll be right back. MiracleHunter.com. Having a great conversation with a fellow host, EWTN host Michael O'Neill of the Miracle Hunter, and just returning from Italy, going back to Italy for the canonizations of Carlo and Blessed Pier, Giorgio, Frassati, Carlo Acutis. And you also have a speaking engagement coming up. Let's get more specific into where, when, and all the good stuff you're going to be talking about, Michael.
Yeah, one of the very fun parts about my job is that on occasion I travel around the United States and give talks at parishes or shrines or conferences, and I probably do about 20 of them a year. And it's a fun thing for me because I get to talk for about 45 minutes, and I always talk about miracles. I'm a one-trick pony in some ways. It's all miracles all the time, but I talk for 45 minutes, and then I open it up to questions, which is a lot of fun because anybody who turns into the radio show, they know that I do a question of the week, and so I get kind of peppered with, a whole bunch of questions that people have just been thinking about their whole lives, maybe, about miracles. So it's a great experience. So I'll be speaking twice in Cincinnati on August 31st and September 1st. The first one is an evening presentation. The next one is a morning one. But I'll be speaking about Eucharistic miracles and Marian apparitions and how the Church investigates the supernatural. And people can go to ourladyoflight.org to sign up for that. But it's a real blessing to be able to present what I've learned from traveling all around the world, the things that I've seen and share that with the audience, and then hear what they're thinking about at the end. So it's a great way to cover this very unique topic of miracles.
Now, in terms of Eucharistic miracles, what do you have, let's say, a favorite? I mean, there's so many, not only in Italy, but around the world. Do you have a favorite site that you like to visit and that gives you a lot of peace, a particular Eucharistic miracle?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've been thinking more and more about Eucharistic miracles over these past couple of years, especially with the Eucharistic Revival and the Eucharistic Congress, and I'm launching a new television series. One of the episodes has aired already. It's called Miracles of the Eucharist, where I take the 5 most scientifically studied cases of Eucharistic miracles. We're talking about Tixla in Mexico and Buenos Aires, and also Sokolka and Legnica in Poland, and also Lanciano. And so I cover those 5 cases, and I interview the actual scientists who have done research on them. So it's an amazing project. The first one is aired. People can watch the first one on demand on EWTN for free, but the other 4 are coming out soon. But in going to all those places and getting access to up-close access to those Eucharistic miracles and talking to the scientists, they're all amazing in their own ways. And I am blown away every time I'm blessed with the opportunity to be there in the presence of a Eucharistic miracle. But I can't get away from Lanciano. We might call it the very first.
Lanciano's incredible. Yep, it's incredible. I agree. Yeah.
And I think that, if you don't have the film credential and you don't have that access, you still are able to walk right up to that monstrance and kneel before it. So close, and they have a beautiful display of all the science as well on the lower level. But we get the sense that these miracles have been happening for centuries and centuries, and that's the very first scientifically studied one. So that will always be very special to me to go to the Church of the Miracle there in Lanciano.
I would totally agree. And it's so interesting because you walk into the church and it's a beautiful church. At the same time, you can walk right up to it and there's places where you could sit along the altar and look at the miracle, like right in front of you. It's amazing.
Yeah, for comparison, in Sokolka and Legnica in Poland, which are also beautiful places of Eucharistic miracles, they have a giant gate or a glass wall that keeps you from getting too close. And maybe that's appropriate and that's fine because it's a very special thing. But compared to Lanciano, it's very different where you can walk right up and venerate the Eucharist very close.
Also, if we look at Orvieto and the Corpus Christi miracle there, the corporal and the Eucharist, that bled on the corporal, that used to be, and you know this better than anybody, it used to be exposed much more frequently, but now they've limited it to certain times of the year. But I mean, that's still a magnificent place to go because of the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas associated with the Eucharistic miracle there, and of course the chapels itself, the Eucharistic Miracle Chapel, and then the chapel on the other side of the church, the San Brizio Chapel. To me, it's one of the most phenomenal churches that really expresses our faith and teaches people the faith from the minute you see the facade until you walk in. But then again, you are limited in terms of when you can actually venerate the miracle itself because they keep it above the tabernacle in a closed context. And then if you go to, for example, the same with the miracle in Siena, which a lot of people are not aware of, the miracle there at St. Francis Church, that is also behind this window, and there's a button. We just saw it actually with Steve. I was leading a tour with Steve Ray back in May, and the priest pressed that button, and this like kind of window or screen goes up, and they talk about the miracle of the host there. But again, Lanciano is there for open view and veneration all year round. Not so with some other miracles.
Correct. I think you hit on that perfectly. I was there in April at these locations in Cascia. And
Cascia's amazing too. Yeah.
And also Siena and Orvieto, Bolsena, all those places. So I got to see these again. And you're right. You don't always have all the access that you do at Lanciano. So I think that's what differentiates it a little bit.
Do you ever wonder, and I know the answer, I know the technical answer and what the church says, but don't you wish sometimes they would do major advertising about the Eucharistic miracles? Like I know they have signs when you go to Italy or Poland, wherever you're going, and they say, Lanciano or Eucharistic miracle, but wouldn't you love them to have those banners that they fly in the back of planes or those big billboards with shining lights and a big marquee? Jesus is here, even outside every church, yes, but especially outside those with the Eucharistic miracles.
Well, strangely, that's my exact motivation for doing this new series, Miracles of the Eucharist with EWTN. While I might not be flying a plane with a flag, the closest
but that could be an idea. You should think about that, Michael.
Network.
Maybe you could do that. You could do that. What do you think?
That could be another episode, right? Put me in my leather jacket in an airplane. But I'm not there yet, but at least I am able to with the funding of EWTN and the promotion of EWTN, get these stories out there, which most people don't know. Most Catholics have never heard of, which I think is incredible that we need to get the word out and at least let people know what's been claimed, what's been scientifically tested, what's around the world. So that's part of the goal of this Miracles of the Eucharist project.
Talking with miracle hunter Michael O'Neill, and he's going to be speaking in the Cincinnati area. You can go to ourladyoflight.org. It's coming up this weekend, as a matter of fact, for more information. Now, there's so much about which you could discuss with miracles and Mary. Are there specific 2 talks, right, when you're speaking in Cincinnati?
Correct. And I think that one of the things that people appreciate about me when I give a talk, and you have mixed audiences, men and women, young and old, people with different backgrounds, but people are always kind of surprised that somebody who's interested in miracles or in faith will focus so much on science. So I love to present the different scientific studies that have been done and present them in a way that is understandable and then answer questions about them. Because I think that there's a lot that's been pushed out there related to Eucharistic miracles, and it's a little bit unclear, and maybe it's not that well organized. But when I try to present it, I try to present it in such a way that people interested in science can really sink their teeth into it and understand it. So I always try to give that angle, the scientific angle, when we talk about Eucharistic miracles, and then also what's claimed with Marian apparitions as well.
I want to go back to Kasha, because that, I think, is another miracle of which people are not very aware. And it's so beautiful there because you have St. Rita, and then right below there is the Chapel of the Eucharistic Miracle. And that's one that I think is very important for us to see, because it's also associated with the priest who was taking the Eucharist very lightly. And then, of course, when he brought the Eucharist to a dying person or a sick man very nonchalantly, he had a real surprise when he arrived, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that for some people, a little bit of the surprise is showing up at the magnificent St. Rita Shrine and learning there is an authentic Eucharistic miracle in the basement or in the lower level of the structure there. So that's its own sort of surprise. But you're right. This is the classic Eucharistic miracle type where you see a priest with doubts experiencing the miracle himself. So we have any number of these throughout Christian history. I'm writing a new book, Miracles of the Eucharist, which corresponds to the TV show, which details stories like Kasha and some of the incredible places of miracles around the world.
Gosh, there's so much that God gives us, and He says, "Come and see." And I just pray, and I'm so grateful for your work. And I know we overlap in areas because we're both trying to. I concentrate mainly on Italy. You go all over the world, but we're trying to get people to see the beauty of the faith on so many different levels: the miracles, the religious sites, the churches, and how God is constantly inviting us into a closer relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're all drawn to beauty, and if we can present that, whether it's on television or in books or in radio, I think people are attracted to that. And one of the great motivations for me doing what I do, traveling the world, is because I know that not everybody can do that, either financially or health reasons or otherwise. Same way. Mm-hmm. But if I can present that beautiful 4K drone footage of these incredible sites like Montenegro that I was just at, it's amazing. And I think that people who can make that long walk up or who can't afford to go, they can still experience it. And one of my favorite parts is after I air something, I get all these emails that say, I've been a Catholic my whole life.
Right.
I'm a believer, I'm knowledgeable, but I never once heard this story. Mm-hmm. And so I love that when people email and say, you've presented to the world a story that is not known. Thank you. So I love that.
Yeah, me too. I get the same thing on these little shrines I talk about in my book and also on my show and on my website, Tease Italy, Travel Italy Expert, about these little shrines. And even in our own area where Deacon Dom and I live in Umbria, which is known, of course, as you know, as the land of the saints. But there's all these little shrines of which people are not aware. We weren't even aware after we had been to Italy, good Lord knows how many times. So it's just a never-ending well of beauty in the faith. All right, so you've got the new book you're working on. When's the new book on miracles coming out?
That'll be out this fall, and new programs on Miracles of the Eucharist are out all the time on EWTN, and then weekly is the Explore with the Miracle Hunter program, which airs at 6 p.m. Eastern Time each Saturday.
Michael, you're a gift. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, where do we find you online, and how can people sign up? Can they sign up for your talk in Cincinnati through your website, or do they need to go to Our Lady of Light?
I would encourage people to go to ourladyoflight.org. They have a sign-up form or a way to contact that organization that's hosting me, and people can sign up for the August 31st or September 1st presentations there in Cincinnati.
All right, so who's publishing your new book? Is it EWTN Publishing?
Oh, always. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, so you will come on the program, right? When it comes out, come back on the program.
I will send you an email as soon as it's out, but
good.
I look forward to that when I think people are going to be interested in learning more about the science behind Eucharistic miracles.
Yeah, I'll tap into your engineering mind for that too. How's that sound? Michael, thank you so much. God bless you. The Miracle Hunter, don't forget his program, weekends on EWTN, and of course his terrific website, and the fact, miraclehunter.com, that he's speaking in Cincinnati, Our Lady of Light, the website for that parish, ourladyoflight.org. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to Catholic Connection on a Friday, August 29th, the feast of St. Augustine. Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O Lord. One of my favorite quotes from this great saint, theologian, philosopher, and of course, father of the church. Here's one that we can all relate to, where he talked about, late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new, late have I loved you. See, it's never, ever too late. If you think about everything that St. Augustine went through, but he realized that once he found the Lord, he could not turn his back. And another one, give me chastity and continence, but not yet. That's from his Confessions, and illustrates the struggle that he had, and the struggle we all have between desire and spiritual commitment to the Lord. All right, so appreciate you listening on a Friday, and so appreciate Michael O'Neill. It's just been great to talk with him and catch up with him. And don't forget that he is going to be speaking in the Cincinnati area. We will be, or I will be heading back to the Motor City today, and then heading out to Italy over the weekend. And God willing, when I talk to you live again, because as I mentioned earlier, we have a special edition for Labor Day coming up on Monday. You don't want to miss it. We've got great guests, Father Michael Schmitz, Father Leo Padlinghug, and others are going to be joining us. But I'll be live with you, good Lord willing, on Wednesday. We have to do some things with immigration in Italy, which take a while, so Vanessa Den Hagarma will be filling in on Tuesday. And then, Lord willing, the creek don't rise, as I always say, we'll be back live from Italy on September 3rd. Have a great weekend. St. Augustine and St. Monica, pray for us.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
On a Friday, second hour of Catholic Connection on August 29, 2025. And of course, wrapping up a great week at the Catholic Radio Conference, which was a lot of fun and very informative. We had great speakers and great sessions. And now we are going to be going into the EWTN family celebration. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay because I'm on my way in a little bit back to the airport and then back to the Motor City before we head out back to Italy. And of course, Monday is Labor Day, and as I've been mentioning so far this morning, we do have a great special edition program for you, all brand new material, all fresh, as we say in the biz, with wonderful interviews with Father Michael Schmitz, Father Leo Padlinghug, John Hale from Corporate Travel. We're going to wrap up your summer talking about the importance of travel and pilgrimage, and bringing you back to beautiful Mackinac Island in the Straits of Mackinac in northern Lower Michigan for our Grand Hotel Getaway, but just talking about the importance of getting away. This is Labor Day weekend, right? It is upon us. You have an opportunity to take advantage of that day off on Monday, the federal holiday, to make the most of it and to spend some time with family and friends, and most importantly, some special time with the Lord. We never take a vacation from God. So wishing you a beautiful Labor Day weekend. Meanwhile, the rest of the program, very, very excited after our 2 cent segment. Going to bring back my friend Deacon Dominic Cerrato, who recently addressed the issue of not enough men coming into the diaconate or discerning the diaconate. This is near and dear, of course, to my heart because my husband is a deacon. And God willing, we'll be celebrating 13 years already of the diaconate. It is amazing. It's gone by very quickly. It's been such a beautiful ministry. We continue to work as a deacon couple together. But what can we do to bring more men and wives? Because the wives are very involved. They have to be involved because it's such a commitment from the men. What can we do to bring couples together to discern? Because the man has to discern on his own to see if this is what God is calling him to. But the wife also needs to discern. And then you discern as a couple. Is this something that we're both called to do? And when you enter into the diaconate formation program, the wife has to agree for the husband to continue. It's very important. But what can we do? Well, I believe it has a lot to do with personal invitation. And I also think we need to be inviting, as does Deacon Dominic Cerrato, the editor of the Deacon magazine, younger men. And don't get put off if potential candidates have children. We'll discuss that. This is based on a report that came out about the number of deacons going down. He'll also take a closer look at those numbers because he has a different understanding of what's actually happening. But he does have a lot of really great concrete ideas of how we can foster vocations. Of course, we talk about the priesthood, the religious life, and the permanent diaconate. So that's coming up on a Friday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Plus, of course, our 2-cent segment, All for You. But first, we need to let you know what is the weather going to look like this Labor Day weekend and what's happening in and around the world. So we'll do that right now. National Weather Service is saying that there's a cool weather pattern continuing for most areas to the east of the Rockies, except for South Texas, northern North Dakota, and northern Minnesota. Above average temperatures are persisting across the Pacific Northwest and the northern Great Basin. Wet weather likely across much of the plains and across the Gulf Coast into Florida. That's a look at the forecast. Now let's take a look at the news on a Friday morning here on EWTN. Well, the FBI is now investigating this week's deadly shooting at the Minneapolis church as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime. Reporter Maggie Vespa says a shooter opened fire as Catholic school students were attending Mass.
Just before the attack, investigators say the shooter posted a series of disturbing videos showing numerous writings on weapons, including racial slurs, a call for President Donald Trump's death, anti-Semitic messages, and references to the Holocaust and the Catholic Church, according to an NBC News review.
2 children ages 8 and 10 were killed in the attack, 17 other people hurt. Police say the shooter, identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman, died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Meanwhile, this child said his friend may be the reason why he wasn't hurt in this week's incident.
The first one, I was like, what is that? I thought it was just something, then when I heard it again, I just ran under the pew, and then I covered my head. My friend Victor, saved me, though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit.
Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said the deceased children died while praying in the pews. 14 of the wounded are children. President Trump, meanwhile, ordering flags flown at half-staff to honor the victims. And the head of emergency services in Minneapolis says, as you just heard, children were indeed protecting other children during the shooting. EMS Chief Mary Sheaver called that amazing. She went on to say there were also teachers protecting children while being shot at themselves. Meanwhile, an ER doctor from local health care taking care of the patient says 9 are still being treated. In total, there were 17 wounded, 14 are children, 3 are adults, and all of them are expected to survive. President Trump's health secretary is speaking out also about the deadly church shooting in Minnesota. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. blamed psychiatric drugs.
One of the culprits we need to examine is whether the fact that we are the most over-medicated nation in the world.
Speaking at a health conference in Texas, he says that other countries do have the same amount of weapons as the U.S., but he claimed they do not have mass shootings as we do here. Court records show that the church shooting suspect called himself or identified as a woman and started that back in 2020, but it's unclear if he was on any medications. In other news this morning, Pope Leo XIV yesterday encouraging Catholic politicians to live coherently as Christians and follow the gospel even when performing their public duties in a secular setting. During a meeting yesterday with a delegation of political representatives in France, accompanied by a local bishop from France, the Holy Father stating that a more just, more human, more fraternal world can only be a world more imbued with the gospel. Thus, he said, in the face of the various deviations present in our Western societies, we can do nothing better as Christians than to turn to Christ and ask for his help in carrying out those responsibilities. For this reason, he said, the Holy Father was highlighting the importance of political and social leaders being committed to acting in coherence with their faith, because beyond mere personal enrichment, it carries great importance and usefulness for the men and women whom they serve. The Latin and Greek Orthodox Patriarchs of Jerusalem releasing a joint appeal for peace in Gaza earlier this week, and they're also saying there's no reason to justify the deliberate and forcible mass displacement of civilians. And as Devin Watkins with Vatican News reports, this week the Holy Father joined the voices and recalled the day of prayer and fasting for peace, which took place on Friday, August 22nd.
He also called for the safe entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza and the protection of civilians. I appeal, added the Pope, for all hostages to be freed, a permanent ceasefire to be reached, the safe entry of humanitarian aid to be facilitated, and humanitarian law to be fully respected. He especially called for respect for the obligation to protect civilians and for the prohibitions against collective punishment, the indiscriminate use of force, and the forced displacement of populations. The Pope concluded his appeal by invoking the Blessed Virgin Mary to pray for peace.
La sua intercessione ottenga riconciliazione e pace.
May her intercession, he prayed, obtain reconciliation and peace in that land so dear to us all. In their appeal, the Patriarchs of Jerusalem said the cycle of violence must end and the common good must be prioritized. There has been enough devastation in the territories and in people's lives, they said. There is no reason to justify keeping civilians as prisoners and hostages in dramatic conditions. The patriarchs pray that hearts may be converted so that we may walk in the paths of justice and life for Gaza and the Holy Land. We do not know exactly what will happen on the ground, not only for our community, but for the entire population, said the patriarchs. But, they added, there can be no future based on captivity, displacement of Palestinians, or revenge. I'm Devin Watkins.
The FBI cracking down on an alleged multi-state forced labor and money laundering scheme linked to a church based out of the city of Detroit. Kyle Taylor, who says he knows some of the victims, claims it was more like a cult.
They would do their best to push you out of here. Some of the individuals that their parents would go here, they would try to go in and get their parents. They were escorted out. It was just fear. It was a fear-based thing that nobody wanted to talk about it, but they knew something was wrong.
Federal prosecutors say David Taylor, a self-proclaimed apostle and executive director, Michelle Branham, ran the Kingdom of God Global Church using unpaid labor at call centers to bring in $50 million in donations over the past 10 years. That money allegedly funded their luxurious lifestyle. Both were arrested Wednesday after FBI raids in Detroit. The White House says the governor of Illinois should ask for help with crime in Chicago. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Chicago's crime rate is the legacy of the governor.
We've been seeing the governor of Illinois parading out there saying that there's nothing wrong with Chicago. It's a great place to live. There's no crime there. He doesn't need President Trump's help. Well, I think the residents of Chicago beg to differ.
President Trump has talked about possibly conducting a similar crime crackdown in the Windy City, similar to the one in Washington. Leavitt also touting the D.C. crackdown, saying violent crime and carjackings are way down since the president's effort began. In a Truth Social post today about Chicago crime, Trump said, stay tuned. Monica Nelson tells us the CDC director has been fired by the White House.
HHS announced Susan Monarez was no longer the agency's director yesterday, and at first she refused to leave the post. Her lawyers said it was due to her being a person of integrity and devoted to science, while also adding she was targeted after clashing with HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. over vaccine policies. A White House spokesperson says she was not aligned with President Trump's agenda and that they had terminated her. At least 4 top health officials announced their resignations as a result. I'm Monica Nelson.
The Florida Attorney General is giving an update on Operation Summer Hurricane, which is aimed at taking child predators off the street.
8 individuals being arrested, 6 are already in custody. And one of these individuals, I will point out, is an illegal alien that should not even be in the country.
The AG says this is an ongoing problem with illegal immigrants being picked up each time they conduct a sting. He recommends closely monitoring children's online activity. Reporter William Denslow says the U.S. and the European Union are now providing details of their new framework trade agreement. He says the two sides have issued a joint statement.
Under this agreement, the baseline tariff rate for European goods heading to the US is set at 15%. EU officials say these duties won't be subject to add-ons, arguing it's a better deal than other nations have reached with Washington.
Tariffs on European cars and auto parts will fall from 25 to 15% if the EU gets rid of all tariffs on American industrial products. The EU is also expected to invest $600 billion across U.S. strategic sectors over the next 3 years. The deal has yet to be finalized. And Monica Nelson tells us Hertz is partnering with Amazon to sell used cars.
The car rental company announced on Wednesday its pre-owned vehicle sales will be hosted on the Amazon Auto website. Customers 75 miles within Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, and Seattle can start shopping now. Amazon Auto has been selling Hyundai vehicles online since 2024. Hertz's stock has jumped higher since the announcement. I'm Monica Nelson.
The TSA says it will screen more than 17 million people during the Labor Day travel period. Now, the period runs from yesterday, August 28th, all the way to next week, September 4th, with the peak travel day projected to be August 30th. TSA expects this to be the busiest Labor Day travel period on record, as the agency anticipates passenger volumes to be 8.5% higher than last year during the same time. Air travel volumes this summer are the highest the agency has seen in its history, and the top 10 busiest travel days in the agency's history have all occurred this year. And if you are taking a trip over the Labor Day weekend, it should be a little easier on the wallet. Kay Nastro of Going Travel says there's good news for people who plan to get to their Labor Day vacation or weekend by car.
We are anticipating that the lower gas prices we've seen most of the summer are going to hold, which is great because a lot of people do tend to opt for a long weekend road trip over Labor Day weekend.
We appreciate you listening to Catholic Connection, the first and the second hour. We are now in the EWTN Radio Extra Hour, and we'll be right back on a Friday of Labor Day weekend. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. It's 10:16 Eastern Time, wherever you are, 9:16 Central, and of course, 7:16 on the West Coast. We're glad you're tuned in. Maybe you're even listening out of the country. If you're over in Italy, it is 4:16, as a matter of fact. If you want to know the time difference, it's about 6 hours difference. Sorry, I'm still kind of going back and forth between the time zones. We just got back here in the United States on Saturday, so it takes a little bit of adjusting. Anyway, I was really moved by the homily our associate pastor, Father Bob, gave at our parish in the Archdiocese of Detroit yesterday. He's such a good homilist. He has a beautiful testimony. Actually, when he became a priest many years ago, probably about 8 years ago now, he actually was on Catholic Connection, the first hour of my program, for my Michigan listeners, telling his story. He worked in the automotive industry for many years and had discerned married life and children, but didn't feel God was calling him to that, and had a profound conversion and decided that he needed to be in the priesthood. Anyway, every time he talks about Jesus on the cross, he gets choked up. He did it again yesterday. He's just a very sensitive and beautiful priest, and I always appreciate his insights. But he was talking about the gospel that we heard yesterday, and the Pope also commenting on this, of course, in his beautiful homily to parishioners at St. Thomas Villanova, which is a really pretty little church in Castel Gandolfo. It's very close to the actual Apostolic Palace. I mean, Castel Gandolfo is not very big, and it's like a very short walk from the palace to the little church there in the main piazza of Castel Gandolfo. Anyway, our associate pastor, Father Bob, was talking about the fact that Jesus gives us a little bit more to think about in terms of how we are to respond to this gospel. So let me just read the gospel for you, because sometimes I know we get busy, we forget what the readings were. It happens to me all the time. So this is a parable of the Good Samaritan, which we heard yesterday, and it's from the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 10. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "What is written in the law?" And he replied, "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3, Jesus asked, do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. All right, so that is a very powerful gospel. Now, our associate pastor, Father Bob, said he looked at it again and thought, wow, look at what Jesus did. So if you look at the way, what Father Bob was saying, if you look at the way Jesus responded to the expert in the law, the expert of the law, right? And I love this line, verse 29 in chapter 10 of Luke's Gospel, in this parable, the Good Samaritan. He wanted to justify himself. And don't we all do that? Okay, I just need to make sure, and this is what Father Bob explained so beautifully, I just need to make sure I have the list. I have the list of all the people that I'm supposed to help. So Jesus, you tell me, am I supposed to help this person? Am I supposed to help that person? Who is it? Well, obviously we know, right, some about that. We see it in the catechism, and we've been told as children growing up in the faith, you have to help the poor, the immigrant, the widow, the most vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, right? The unborn, obviously. We're pro-life from womb to tomb. We know all of that. But what Jesus, I believe, and this is what Father Bob said, and I was talking to him about this after Mass, Jesus is saying, okay, but do you have eyes to see and ears to hear? I shouldn't have to give you a list. If you are connected to me, and if you love me with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, then you should have some insight into the needs of people. You should have some insight. And so what does that mean? That requires us, which I think is a real challenge, and this is what really made me think after my associate pastor's homily, is that we have to work at this, okay? Which means we have to be engaged and we have to be open, because it may not be just that typical list of people that I just mentioned. Now, that's obvious, right? Being pro-life people, we're always going to be concerned with life from womb to tomb. Pregnant mothers who need our help and support, the unborn child in the womb, the elderly, right? Against assisted, so-called assisted suicide, all these things. So the basics, the poor, make sure that we're tithing properly and making sure we're supporting efforts in our area. We're going to talk about that in the next segment regarding what's happening in Texas and how people are helping. All right, so we support charities, we support the poor, we support others in need, but what does that mean? And what Father said in his homily, he said it's not always that typical list of people. There could be somebody right next door in our own domestic church, in our own family, that is someone in need of mercy and love. And so God doesn't want us to put that in a box. And this is just a brilliant, I think, answer, where Jesus is telling him, look at this. And you have all these people. And I think it was very, very interesting that he mentioned a priest and a Levite. So this man of the law would recognize that these people who were very official, a priest and a Levite, thou should know better, right? But what did they do? They passed by him on the other side. And so if this man's trying to justify himself, he can't justify himself as someone who is very learned and supposedly knowledgeable, and then seeing these 2 examples of people who are pretty close to his level of ignoring the obvious. So what Jesus is telling all of us is that just because you may, know scripture and know church teaching, it's a lot different than acting on it. And also the fact that it was a Samaritan. Samaritans were very, very much disrespected and looked down upon by the people of the law, by the Jews, of course, so that we know the Samaritan woman. They were considered to be of, uncouth heritage. They were mixed. They weren't pure Jews. and they were looked down upon. And that's why when we see in the Gospel of John and the woman at the well, that the apostles, it says, disciples, when they came back, were shocked that he was talking to a woman. Well, first of all, another example where men didn't have public conversations with women. Women weren't deemed important enough, number one. Number two, it would be scandalous for a man to be talking to a woman in public the way Jesus was engaging this woman at the well. So that's why it says the apostles were surprised he was talking to a woman. But again, this was a Samaritan woman, and Jesus revealed so much to her. And he was revealing to us how we shouldn't, number one, look down on people, and number two, think because we are knowledgeable or maybe have a theology degree or maybe have done a lot in terms of Bible study, think we get it all. Are we really being open? Are we really looking beyond the obvious? You don't need to be hit over the head with the Bible or a catechism to know that you have to help the poor, the immigrant, those in need and physical need. Again, the unborn, the elderly. But you do have to be dedicated enough to the Lord and to constantly pray, Lord, what do I need to do here? Am I missing something or someone that's really in need right under my nose? Just like the Levite, right? And the priest, literally seeing this man half dead on the road and they walk by, not paying any attention. How many times do we do that? And so Jesus is not going to, as Father Bob said yesterday in his beautiful homily, he's not going to put it all in a nice little box for us, because it is a journey. It's a journey of the heart. And as Pope Leo said in his beautiful reflection on this yesterday, both the audience and in his homily, how do we look upon others? Because that's what's revealing what's in our hearts. We don't want to be like the Levite and the priest, looking down on the Samaritan. We want to be, or the poor man, we want to be like the Samaritan who saw with his heart. So we need to think about that. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Great to be with you on Catholic Connection and EWTN production. And always great to catch up with my friend, Deacon Dominic Cerrato, who's a PhD, a wonderful longtime deacon, an author, a speaker, and of course also editor of the beautiful The Deacon magazine, for which I write a Deacon's Wife column. He has a new book out, As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of the Church. But first, Deacon Dominic, I do want to discuss, and this was really disappointing to me, because you and I know, and Judy and I know as deacons' wives, and Dominic knows, my Dominic knows, how beautiful the diaconate ministry is. But an annual report from the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, and by the way, Catholic News Agency has an article on this that was posted last month, the middle of June. The number of ordinations of permanent deacons in the U.S. has decreased by nearly 200 from 2023 to 2024, according to a recent survey. That's very disappointing to me. I'm sure it's disappointing to you as well. Thanks for joining us, Deacon. Appreciate it.
That's great to be here with you.
So what do you think?
Well, I think that you have to look at things not in isolation, but in the broader context. And it can be argued that the diaconate is the largest growing segment in the church. So to see a small dip, especially in light of certain factors which we can discuss, factors which I think are generally temporary, is simply a little downturn in an otherwise upward rise.
Okay, so what are we looking at? What do you think is impacting this slight dip, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, post-COVID vocational lag. There's a disruption in nearly every aspect of diocesan life as a result of COVID, including diaconal formation programs, ordination schedules, discernment retreats, and even in-person parish ministries. And these are key touch points for identifying and nurturing vocations to the diaconate. Some dioceses, including the one I work for, the Diocese of Joliet, actually delays our intake of a new class, which would account for part of this lag. There's certainly an aging diaconal corpus, I should say, not corpse. So many are going out where we have fewer coming in, but young people are unfortunately being discouraged for coming in the diaconate. And I think this is most unfortunate, because if God calls and it's a genuine call, he's going to provide the grace. Other factors, including cultural shifts, formation, and limited resources, all of these add up to a slight downturn in an otherwise rising trend within the diaconate.
You mentioned something, you said that young people are being discouraged from applying for the diaconate. Why is that?
Well, I think the diaconate hasn't fully entered into the Catholic imagination, and people tend to see it as this sort of the grandpa club or a retirement vocation. Consequently, when people have young families, some deacons and some priests have actively discouraged young people from entering the diaconate, saying, wait till your family is settled. Now, that may well be the case in some cases, but the point here, Teresa, is formation is discernment. They're discerning, just as to say the men in formation and their families are discerning the diaconate, but also the diocese is discerning them. And it may well be the case that they're not called early, but it may be the case. And I think the wholesale say that you should wait is most unfortunate, and it fails to take into consideration the grace of God, which can be received if the call is genuine.
You know, that's a great point, because it seems as if, and of course, Deacon Dominic and I weren't blessed with any children of our own, but we knew many couples who were discouraged in our area from going into the diaconate because they had very young children. And it seems almost like an accepted, or everybody thinks that's the rule.
Right. And I was ordained at the youngest canonical age at 35. We had 5 children at that time. We have blessed with 7 children at this point. But and so I had young children, even in infants, even after I was ordained. Again, my call, I believe, was genuine. Certainly the diocese thought that way, and most important, my wife thought that as well. And so God gave us the grace to be able to do this. And I think that has to be discerned on a case-by-case basis. So a wholesale elimination of young people, I think, is most unfortunate, and it fails, again, to take into account God's grace.
Isn't it a concern, though, even with a slight dip, because given the number of priests, or lack thereof, we need deacons. I mean, deacons are needed, and I think they're going to be relied upon even further in the future of the church, in the near future, don't you?
I do, and I think there's 2 elements to that. The first of which, as you bring up, is the pragmatic element. Our priests are getting fewer and they're getting older, and therefore deacons can, within the scope of their ministries, do some of the things that priests can do, and therefore relieve some of that pastoral shortfall. That's certainly, in fact, as a director, I would get calls regularly from priests who say, I need a deacon, and I'm like, let me check my closet. Let me see if I have any. You got to send them to me, and there's a pipeline, right, for deacons. But there's something else going on here, and we've got to ask ourselves, I think, a very important question, and that is, when the diaconate was restored, there was no priestly vocational crisis. The seminaries were full. Parishes were full. So why was it restored? Was it restored for pragmatic reasons? Oh, I think not. Why? Well, the diaconate is the preeminent witness of Christ the servant to the world. I mean, that's what the diaconate really is. Everything he does flows from that witness to Christ the servant, which should be active in every baptized person. So I believe that it's a movement of the Holy Spirit to renew and rediscover Christ the servant across every vocation, both lay and clerical vocations.
What can we do to really promote the diaconate? Because it's such a beautiful ministry, and it's not just a ministry, as you said, unless you're a single man who's going into the diaconate. But if you're usually it's a married man, and most of the married deacons, most of the deacons in the United States at least, are married. What can we do to promote the diaconate?
Well, certainly from the inside out, deacons themselves can promote the diaconate simply by the exercise of revealing Christ the servant in their various ministries. But the other thing is that, and this is from Deacon James Keating, he speaks about it not entering into the Catholic imagination. The catechesis is not there. Even in seminary, the transitional deacons are given very little, if any, formation on the diaconate. They receive formation in terms of the liturgical aspects of it, but not really in the sort of the ontological, the deeper reality, because the church argues that a man must first be, on the deepest level of his being, a deacon before he becomes a priest. So seminary formation, that means it enters into the imagination of the priesthood, it enters into the imagination of the episcopacy. Catechesis, it moves to the laity, and those things together. Also, it would help if Catholic publications, particularly periodicals and so forth, popular publications, could write more on the diaconate. And you find very little written on the diaconate. We see this lack of imagination when you hear the universal prayer at Mass. That's pray for our Pope, our bishops, our priests, our religious, our lay, on and on and on. And the deacon is almost always left out of that equation.
Well, our church includes it. My pastor is very pro diaconate, and he's always reminding people about this beautiful ministry of the diaconate. Having a great conversation with our friend Deacon Dominic Cerrato, author, PhD, speaker, and deacon, of course, editor of the Deacon magazine. When we come back, we'll wrap up our discussion on the way we can help promote the diaconate, given the numbers are slightly down, and we need to keep them moving up. We're going to take a look also at his new book, As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ. It's published by our friends at Our Sunday Visitor. Deacon Dominic, how long have you been a deacon now? How many years?
30 years.
Wow, 30 years. Yeah, Deacon Dom my Deacon Dom will celebrate 13 years in October, and it's gone by so fast. It's a beautiful ministry. We'll be right back. More on the diaconate. Stay tuned. You're listening to Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. Always love catching up with my paisan and my good friend Deacon Dominic, another Deacon Dominic Cerrato, talking about the slight dip in diaconate numbers over the last couple of years, but we always want to be positive and look at the glass as half full versus half empty. But before we move on to your beautiful book, any final thoughts, Deacon Dom, on how we can make a difference in the diaconate to get more people encouraged? Because, it's such a beautiful ministry, not just for the men, but for the wives as well. I love being a deacon's wife.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're doing things, for example, right now on your show. So people are getting to understand, and of course the next segment will get into that a little bit more. So I think things like publications, things like the radio and television, EWTN, those kinds of things are awful helpful, or tremendously helpful, I should say, in promoting the diaconate. But the point I made earlier is very important, and part of what my ministry is about is helping deacons become more fully who they are. And I think that we can talk about the diaconate, but when they see the diaconate, people see the diaconate, actually Christ the servant incarnate in the very work. That I think is the most important way to help the diaconate enter into the Catholic imagination.
And I think to encourage people, if they're curious, to make sure they call their diocese or their archdiocese. So, for example, in southeastern Michigan, the Archdiocese of Detroit, we have a meeting where they just bring men who are just thinking about it, and they invite their wives just to kind of hear the process. What does it mean to apply for the diaconate, the discernment process, the program, the classes, the formation, just to give you a sense of what's involved. So if someone is out there listening, and there usually is, that maybe somebody has it on their heart that they might want to discern the diaconate, I would go ahead and make sure you call your diocese and get into one of those meetings, right?
That's right. You can also go online to take a look at what they've got going on there. It would be the diaconal page. Contact the director of the diaconate.
Right.
But I'm seeing a rise simply anecdotally, because we currently have about 20 men that will be ordained in August. We have 2 cohorts currently going on, and we haven't even begun advertising, and we have for that next cohort 13 men who've made application. So we're seeing a bump after the slight downturn. I don't know if this is anecdotal or statistical.
And what diocese is that again, Deacon?
That's the Diocese of Joliet, just south of Chicago.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Let's move on to your beautiful book, As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ. Why did you decide to write this, Deacon Dominic?
Well, I think one of the things that I've seen, and it's a result of, I think, secular forces pushing in on the church, is that we tend to become much more functional than relational. Right? We're not human doings, we're human beings. And the relationship between priests, deacons, and even clergy in general, as in our society, tends to be functional. Think of it as 2 gears coming together, 2 cogs in a machine. When we come together, let's say at liturgy, well, we're connected. But then when we leave, we sort of live separate lives and far away. And just as in marriage, the importance of marriage and the unity of marriage to the well-being of the children, so too with the priests and the deacons coming together. And so there needs to be more work in that area. And the other thing is that it strikes me very clear that Christ wants this unity because it's a unity grounded in him, Teresa. What do I mean by that? Jesus says in both Mark and Matthew's gospel, I have come not to be served, but to serve. That's diakonia. That's diakonos. He is the diakonos. He is the deacon, the par excellence. And then he says, and give my life as ransom for the many. That's sacerdotes. That's priesthood. The diaconate and the priesthood come together in the one Christ, such as to split them up or to not have unity is to somehow to split up the Christus totus, the whole Christ. And so the book attempts to find both theological and practical means to bring priests and deacons together so that they themselves could be mutually nourished and the faithful benefit from that.
How are you seeing a disconnect then? I mean, obviously you wrote the book because you see this is obviously necessary to strong former bonds and working together in relationships. But what are some of the issues that you've seen?
Well, I mentioned functionality. Now, the deacon is called to be a servant. And if he only functions with the priest, only connects at certain times, he doesn't get to know the priest. Well, you can't really serve someone you don't really know. The more you know, like in marriage, you know Dominic, so you know what he would want in his absence. And when priests and deacons don't have that, they don't understand each other in their absence. And I think that is a critical thing. And so I see it there, and I see it in other aspects of church life, pastorally, liturgically, and a number of other different areas where we simply disconnect. And this is really symptomatic of a deeper disconnect in that priests used to live in community. They used to relate to one another. Now they live in separate areas, in separate rectories. And so the relationship of priest to priest also needs to be strengthened, as well as priest and deacon.
So what are some of your ideas? Share with us. Now, I don't want to give it all away because we want people to buy the book, As I Have Loved You. But how do we overcome this?
Well, it's interesting because in the book, which is only 5 chapters, it's not a big book, but in the book, in each chapter, I lay the theological foundation and I lay then the pastoral application, or how priests and deacons come together. And in the heart of the book, I talk about priests rediscovering their own diaconate because they were ordained deacons. But that notion of a transitional deacon is, while descriptive, very misleading because it hides more than it reveals. Because they don't transition out of the diaconate. Quite the opposite. They have this diaconate, which is, of course, ontological, and of course, it's like an indelible mark. It stays with them. And then they're ordained priests. Well, the priesthood doesn't swallow up the diaconate. Rather, they both cohabitate or coexist in the one priest. In order for a priest to truly appreciate the diaconate, he has to fully appreciate and appropriate his own diaconate. And when he does so, the relationship between priests and deacons are strengthened, as with the bishop. Now, the next chapter, most interestingly, it speaks about the priesthood of the diaconate.
Diaconate,
what?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what is that all about? You say, well, the Catechism says that there are 2 participations in the one priesthood of Christ. There's the hierarchical or ministerial priesthood, Father so-and-so, and of course, the lay people, and that would be the common or royal priesthood. But I suspect there's a 3rd participation because deacons are neither priests nor their laity, and that is the sort of the diaconate priesthood. What is that? Well, a priest is one who offers sacrifice in the atonement of sins. When the deacon gives himself in service, he is sacrificing himself because the quality of love is expressed in the depths of the sacrifice. And diaconia is not something I do, but someone I give my very self. So as priests discover the diaconate within them, and as deacons discover a priesthood within them, that lays a foundation, a theological foundation grounded in Christ, who is a deacon and priest. And as a result, then we can move to practical ways. And the book then goes into how priests and deacons can meet, the reflection questions they might have, and how they can continue on past the book.
Why did you feel the need, which I think is great, I love that, I do that in a lot of my books as well, because it gets people to stop and think, but why the reflection questions? Why did you think that was necessary, Deacon?
Well, first of all, it provides an opportunity for both priests and deacons to come together, because if we just come together, guys are funny that way. We don't just get together for coffee and just chat about things. No, there's got to be a football game on, or a common hobby or something. It's just the nature of the way we're wired.
Right.
And if we don't have something to speak about, we just stare at each other and then we go our separate ways. So it was important for us, I think, to have something. The other thing is, to use an unfortunate analogy, it's not force feed and regurgitation. It's eating, it's consuming and digesting. Reflection questions allow you to take the objective stuff you're talking about and say, well, how does that apply to me? And how can that help me live my vocation out in a more profound way?
I don't think those ideas, and I think they're very powerful, and going through the book, it really caught my attention as a deacon's wife, the diaconate in the priesthood and the priesthood in the diaconate. I don't think I've ever heard that before until I picked up your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was a shock to me, too. You know, they say even a blind pig can stumble on an acorn. And sometimes I stumble on a few acorns. But it arises out of, goes back to my own formation, particularly theological formation, and the influence of Pope John Paul II and his personalism. So having in my path books developed the theology of the diaconate and then developed the theology of holy orders, because, and I describe in the book, a triptych, right? You got the bishop in the middle, and then the two flaps, the two sides are the priest and deacon. Well, if one is partially closed, the diaconate, it obscures the other parts. Moreover, the whole story can't be told unless both sides of the triptych are open. Developing the theology of the diaconate, the next natural consequence was and holy orders, how do these come together? And so this book really is part of a series of 3 books in which we deal with the servant reality now in the clergy.
Is this something you'd like to see in diaconate formation and priestly formation programs? I think it would be very helpful.
Oh, yes, absolutely, because I think that until we understand the full nature of holy orders, we're not going to understand the full nature of Christ, who is diakonos and sacerdos, who is deacon and priest. And Christ is the perfect revelation of God the Father. And so when that's obscured, well, something of that revelation is obscured. But when that's revealed, God's revelation, which is ultimately a divine love outpoured, when that's revealed, then the whole world benefits from it. Not just the church, but the whole world benefits from it.
How much emphasis in your research and work over the years, Deacon Dom, have you seen the seminaries and the formation programs for priests talk about and help them with their diaconate to make it a really big part of their process to priestly ordination? Because I can remember so many priests, even some who are now bishops, when they were serving their diaconate portion of their ministry at our parish. They go on to be great priests. Now they're bishops or whatnot. But I don't remember hearing too much about that step, except to recognize that they were in that transitional period on their way to priesthood.
In seminaries, unfortunately, there's very little formation with regard to the diaconate. And Deacon Keating, myself, and about 3 others wrote a piece in the a journal describing the lack of priestly diaconal formation in priestly formation. I spoke one time to a vice rector of a major seminary, and I asked him about that. He got a little defensive, and he said, well, we're ordaining priests. And I said, but you're also ordaining deacons, right? I mean, how could you be open to a sacrament you're not prepared for? So, and I talked to a priest, and he said to me, well, we had sacraments. And I said, okay, so you had sacraments, and there are 3 categories of sacraments, one of which is the sacraments of service, and then you've got 2 of those, one holy orders, one marriage, and then holy orders, you got divided into 3. So that's not sufficient. So there isn't a lot of formation and that's unfortunate, because again, I think when the priest discovers his diacon, this is critical, he discovers something about his priesthood. So look, a priest is a priest in a coma when he's asleep, right? But his priesthood enters the world through his diaconate. Think about this. We call it priestly ministry, ministerium, diaconia. And so if they don't fully embrace their diaconate, they're going to attenuate their priesthood.
Wow. Really important stuff. And I hope this book gets into the hands of, even if men are listening right now and are thinking about applying for the diaconate, get a copy of this book. And I really hope dioceses pick up on this as well. As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ, by our guest, my friend, Deacon Dominic Cerrato. How do we get the book?
Well, you can get it through Amazon or Sunday Visitor would be the best place to get it. And even lay people, if they want to get that for their priests and deacons, that would be a great thing too.
Well, my deacon husband, as I told you, when the book came in the mail, he even grabbed it from me. I had to grab it back in order to do the prep for this show. Deacon Dom, always great to talk to you, my friend. Give Judy my love, and we will talk soon. Again, get this beautiful book, friends. It's just really well done and very quick to read, too. As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ. We'll be right back. I hope you can check the great work of Deacon Dominic Cerrato. I also write a monthly column or bi-monthly column for the Deacon magazine as a deacon's wife. And Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers also writes in the magazine, our own EWTN Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. And don't forget, if you have something on your heart and you think there might be a man in your parish and something tells you, maybe he should look into the diaconate, don't be shy. Because as you've heard before, there have been several people in our lives that encourage Deacon Dominic and I to consider that, and it made all the difference. Okay, so as I mentioned, wanted to wish you a beautiful Labor Day weekend. I cannot believe it's Labor Day already. We have a great, very special, fresh show for you on Monday morning. So excited. We are going to be speaking with the one, the only Father Leo Pedlinghug, Father Michael Schmitz, John Hale from Corporate Travel. We'll check in with the Rome boys who also showed up all the way from Texas up to the Grand Hotel. So we're giving you an end of summer preview talking about travel. We'll highlight the Grand Hotel getaway, which is phenomenal, sold out again this year. But more importantly, we're going to talk about the importance of getting away. And I think it will be very timely, being that this will be airing on Labor Day. I think it'll be great. I think you'll enjoy it. We'll also have some special ideas for you and how you can check out the wonderful things that we'll be doing with Corporate Travel, upcoming pilgrimages. Now, even though the Good News Cruise 2026 is sold out, we do have 2027 that's already in the works, so you should go to goodnewscruise.com for more information. Have a great Labor Day, and God willing, we'll talk to you on Monday on Labor Day. Ciao, ciao.